As we saw in the earlier videos for 3-axis planar and 3-axis Z-finish, both planar and Z-finish have limitations when cutting a surface with flat and more vertical surfaces. Planar cut works best on flat surfaces. Z-finish cut works best on more vertical surfaces. In the example we have here, we have a combination of both types of surface. What I'd like to do now is show you a tool path that will cut the entire part. To begin, we move up to NC, down to 3-axis, and to steep and shallow. Pick the visible, and then we're going to select the same 3/8 ball-nosed end mill that we had earlier. Change the tool number to 1, length offset 1, diameter 1, and then move on to cut control. After moving to the cut control tab, the first thing I want to call your attention to is areas to machine. This is one of the keys to steep and shallow machining. This is where we make our choice of what surfaces to machine: the steep and shallow surfaces, the shallow only, or the steep only. For the beginning, I'm going to leave it at steep and shallow. If we go down to about the middle of the page, we can see a shallow angle range, and right below that a steep angle range. This determines how we're going to cut the part. From 0 to 30 degrees, we're going to cut the part with one type of tool path, and from 30 degrees to 90 degrees, we're going to cut the part with another type of tool path. If we go back up and look at step over, this is the distance that we're stepping over between passes on the shallow angle range. Our step down of 0.1 is the distance between passes on the steep angle range. I'm going to click OK, and we're going to see what we get. If we look at our steep-shallow tool path, you can see we've cut the part with two different strategies. Looking at the orange surfaces, we're cutting them with a Z-finish style tool path, and if we look at the flatter surfaces, we're cutting them with an offset style tool path. Remember, these are controlled by our steep-shallow range. From 0 to 30 degrees, the purple surfaces and cyan surfaces, we cut with a shallow cutting strategy. From 30 degrees to 90 degrees, the orange surfaces, or the steeper surfaces, we cut them with a steep cutting strategy. I'm going to make some adjustments here, and we're going to try again. I'm going to go to the Operations Manager and regenerate with original geometry. Under the Cut Control tab, I'm going to step over, that is my step over on the shallower surfaces. I'm going to make that 20 thousandths. For my step down, I'm going to make that 50 thousandths. Going to click OK, and we'll regenerate. As you can see, using our new parameters, we have a much denser tool path than we had before. We zoom up on the part, our step over and step down is 20 thousandths and 50 thousandths respectively. I can make some other changes to this that will make it a more efficient tool path yet. I'm going to go to the Operations Manager and regenerate this tool path with the original geometry. Where we can gain some time here is under the Leads and Links tab. In the shallow regions, that is the flatter regions, we're cutting in a one-way direction. I can change this to bidirectional if that's acceptable. In the steep regions, we're forcing it to climb mill everywhere. I can also make it cut conventionally or bidirectionally. I'm going to change it to bidirectional. Finally, I'm going to change the retract strategy from full retract to shortest route. I'll click OK, OK at the bottom, and we'll regenerate. When we look at the finished tool path, you can see that we have a step down of 50 thousandths on the steeper regions and a step over of 20 thousandths on the shallower regions. What I'm going to do next is move up to the Operations Manager and regenerate the part with original geometry. I'm going to go to Cut Control and tell it that we don't want to machine the steep and shallow regions, but only the shallow regions. Click OK, and we'll regenerate. As you can see, when shallow only is selected as the surfaces to machine, we only get the shallow regions. That is, the surfaces that have an angle from 0 to 30 degrees. Next, I'm going to go to the Operations Manager and regenerate and change the angle from shallow only to steep only. Here we're going from 30 degrees to 90 degrees. Click OK and we'll regenerate again. With the steep shallow selection set to steep only and our angle set from 30 degrees to 90 degrees, here you can see we machine only the steeper surfaces. I'd like to show you one more thing in steep shallow cutting. We're going to go to the Operations Manager and regenerate the tool path once more. Under Cut Control, I'm going to change the areas to machine from steep only to steep and shallow. Once again, we have our 0 to 30 for the shallow angle and 30 to 90 for the steep angle. Something new is going to be Use Check Surfaces. I'm going to click on Use Check Surfaces and click OK. In the bottom left corner, SURFCAM asked us to select the check surfaces. I'm going to click on the purple surface and the tool path will be regenerated. When we look at the created tool path, you can see that we have avoided the purple surface completely because it was set up as a check surface, but have cut the rest of the part. So in conclusion, a steep shallow cut is a good cut to use if you have a part that is a combination of both shallow and steep surfaces.